My ruthless mother-in-law and sister-in-law poisoned my drink, leaving me for dead while they stole my luxury hotel and fortune. After months in a coma, I returned stronger. At the family gala, their faces froze in terror as I entered, alive and ready to unleash the revenge they never saw coming. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I thought I had everything I ever wanted in life. Growing up in a small town in Mexico, I never imagined that one day I'd be the owner of a chain of successful boutique hotels across California. Building my business wasn't easy. I worked tirelessly, often late into the night, with only my dreams to keep me going. But eventually I succeeded. My hotels became known for their warmth and impeccable service, attracting guests from all over the world. When I met Victor Morgan, I thought I'd found someone who understood me. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely proud of what I had achieved. Victor came from an old money family in Los Angeles. The Morgans had once been one of the most powerful names in California real estate, but their empire was faltering. Victor often talked about how he wanted to rebuild the family legacy, and I believed we could do it together. Our romance moved quickly. Within a year, we were married. Looking back, I realized I was blinded by love. I didn't notice the subtle red flags, the way Victor always deferred to his mother, Catherine, or how his sister, Fiona, seemed to treat me with thinly veiled disdain. At the time, I brushed it off as nerves or cultural differences. I thought I could win them over. After the wedding, everything changed. Catherine, a regal woman in her late 50s with a sharp tongue, made it clear that I was not what she had envisioned for her son. She often commented on my background, making snide remarks about how I didn't quite fit in with their circles. Fiona, in her early 30s and obsessed with her image, was no better. She constantly criticized my style, my accent, and even the way I ran my business. At first, Victor seemed to support me. He would tell me to ignore them and focus on our life together. But as time went on, I noticed a shift. He began siding with them in arguments, questioning my decisions, and pressuring me to spend more time at home instead of managing my hotels. It was subtle at first, but soon it became clear. They wanted me to give up my business entirely. One evening, Catherine invited us to dinner at the family estate. I remember sitting across the long dining table, surrounded by their opulent decor, as she made her intentions known. "Elena," she said, her tone deceptively sweet, "you've worked so hard. Don't you think it's time to let Victor take some of the burden? After all, a woman's true place is with her family." I was stunned. "Catherine, my business is my passion. I'm not giving it up." Victor chimed in, his voice unusually firm. "It's not about giving it up, Elena. It's about what's best for all of us. You can trust me to handle it." Their words left no doubt. They wanted control of everything I had built. They even suggested I transfer my assets to Victor for the family's benefit. I refused outright. That night, I realized I wasn't just fighting to keep my business. I was fighting to keep my independence. What I didn't know was how far they were willing to go. Over the next few weeks, things became more hostile. Catherine and Fiona spread rumors about me in their social circles, trying to damage my reputation. Victor became distant, often dismissing my concerns. I tried to hold everything together, but the pressure was mounting. Then, the unthinkable happened. It was another family dinner, the kind I had started to dread. Catherine insisted I try the special wine she'd had imported from France. I hesitated. It wasn't like me to drink much, especially around them. But Victor smiled and poured me a glass. "You'll love it," he said, his tone light but his eyes unreadable. I took a sip. Then another. That's the last thing I remember. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The doctor told me I had been in a coma for nearly 3 weeks. They said I had suffered from severe poisoning, but they couldn't determine the source. My mind raced. I wanted to believe it was an accident, but deep down I knew better. Victor was there when I woke up, but his concern felt hollow. He barely met my eyes as he explained what had happened. "The doctors aren't sure how it happened," he said, his voice flat. "Maybe it was something you ate." I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I was too weak. Instead, I watched as he left the room, his phone already in his hand, texting someone as if I didn't exist. I knew then that I couldn't trust him. And I knew I had to uncover the truth. Recovering from the coma was the hardest thing I'd ever faced. My body was weak and my spirit even weaker. Lying in that hospital bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just bad luck or an accident. My instincts told me it was something much darker. But who would believe me? I couldn't prove anything, not yet. Victor visited a few more times during my recovery, but his demeanor was cold, almost resentful, as if my survival had inconvenienced him. Catherine and Fiona never came, which didn't surprise me. They had barely pretended to care about me when I was healthy, so why start now? When I finally returned home, everything felt off. My once beautiful home felt like a prison. Catherine had redecorated parts of the house without asking me, and Victor had moved some of my belongings into storage. It was as if they were erasing my presence, piece by piece. I needed answers. I hired a private investigator, someone discreet who wouldn't alert the Morgans to my suspicions. His name was Mark Daniels, and he came highly recommended. When I explained my situation, he didn't look surprised. "You're not the first person to deal with a family like this," he said. His confidence reassured me. Mark started digging into everything, the family's finances, their connections, and most importantly, the events leading up to my poisoning. I knew I couldn't trust anyone, so I kept my plans secret. Not even my closest friends knew what I was doing. While Mark investigated, I tried to regain control of my life. I returned to managing my hotels, but things were different. Several key staff members had abruptly resigned, and some of my best clients had been poached by competitors. It was clear someone was trying to destabilize my business. One evening, Mark called me with an update. "Elena, I've found something," he said. His voice was calm, but I could sense the urgency. We met at a small coffee shop, away from prying eyes. "What did you find?" I asked, barely able to contain my anxiety. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs, financial records, and a USB drive. "Your husband and his family have been busy," he said. "Catherine and Fiona have been funneling money from their real estate deals into a private account. They're using your name and assets as collateral for their failing ventures." I felt a wave of anger and disbelief. "They're stealing from me?" "It gets worse," Mark said. "I also found footage from the night you were poisoned. The security cameras at the family estate captured Catherine instructing the staff to prepare your drink. One of the kitchen workers admitted that Fiona paid him to tamper with it." My stomach turned. It was one thing to suspect they hated me, but to see evidence of their betrayal, it was overwhelming. "Victor?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark hesitated. "He's not innocent, Elena. He knew what was happening. He didn't stop it and he didn't warn you." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The man I had loved, the man I had trusted, had stood by and let this happen. I couldn't let them get away with it. But I also knew I had to be smart. Storming into the family estate and confronting them would accomplish nothing. I needed a plan. I decided to play their game, but on my terms. I told Mark to keep digging while I began my own quiet campaign. I started showing up at the Morgan real estate offices, posing as a supportive wife interested in helping with their business. Catherine and Fiona were suspicious at first, but Victor vouched for me, saying I wanted to make amends after our recent tensions. What they didn't know was that I was collecting information. I paid close attention during meetings, overheard conversations, and accessed documents whenever I could. Over time, I began to piece together the full scope of their schemes. Catherine had been using fake property deals to inflate the company's value, fooling investors into pouring money into a sinking ship. Fiona had partnered with shady developers, skimming profits and laundering money through offshore accounts. And Victor, my Victor, had signed off on everything. One night, after a particularly tense meeting, I confronted Victor privately. "Do you even care about what they've done to me?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "Elena, you don't understand," he said, avoiding my gaze. "This is about family. You're either with us or against us." "Family?" I laughed bitterly. "You let them poison me, Victor. You stood by while they tried to destroy everything I've worked for. That's not family. That's betrayal." He didn't respond. His silence spoke louder than any words could. I left that conversation more determined than ever. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting to expose the truth. Mark and I gathered everything we needed: financial records, witness statements, and the security footage from the night of the poisoning. The pieces were falling into place, but I knew I couldn't stop there. I needed a public platform, a way to reveal the Morgans' corruption to the world. As I gathered evidence against the Morgans, the weight of their betrayal grew heavier. Every piece of information Mark uncovered was another blow to my trust, my love, and my belief in the life I thought I had. But it also fueled my determination to fight back. This wasn't just about reclaiming my assets or my business. It was about taking back my dignity and ensuring they could never hurt anyone else. My opportunity came sooner than I expected. The Morgans were planning a high-profile charity gala, a flashy event designed to restore their tarnished reputation and attract new investors. Catherine was boasting about it at every meeting, calling it the revival of the Morgan legacy. The irony wasn't lost on me. I decided the gala would be my stage. If I was going to expose them, I wanted the whole world to see their fall. I worked with Mark to finalize our evidence: forged contracts, fraudulent property deals, offshore accounts, and, most damning of all, the footage of Catherine and Fiona's poisoning scheme. Every document, every statement was meticulously organized. Meanwhile, I continued my double life, pretending to support the Morgans while secretly working against them. It wasn't easy. Catherine's sharp eyes always seemed to linger on me a little too long, as if she suspected something. Fiona's snide remarks had grown harsher, and Victor, well, he had become a stranger. He avoided me at home, burying himself in work or disappearing for hours without explanation. I stopped caring. Whatever love I'd once felt for him was gone. As the gala approached, I began reaching out to key players in their world: investors, journalists, and even a few of their employees who had been coerced into silence. Many were hesitant to speak out, fearing retaliation, but I promised them anonymity and protection. Slowly, people started to come forward, sharing their stories of manipulation and deceit. The night of the gala finally arrived. The Morgans had spared no expense, transforming their estate into a glittering spectacle of wealth and opulence. Guests in designer gowns and tailored suits filled the grand hall, sipping champagne and exchanging pleasantries. Catherine and Fiona worked the room, their polished smiles hiding the rot beneath. Victor stood off to the side, looking as hollow as I felt. I waited until the event was in full swing before making my move. As Catherine stood on stage, delivering a speech about the resilience and vision of the Morgan family, I stepped forward. "Excuse me, Catherine," I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the crowd. "I think it's time we share the real story of the Morgan legacy." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. Catherine's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of panic. Fiona's hand tightened around her glass, and Victor, he just stared at me, his face unreadable. "I've spent the past few months uncovering the truth about this family," I continued. "What you see here tonight, the luxury, the wealth, it's built on lies, fraud, and betrayal." I turned to the screen behind me, where Mark had set up a projector. One by one, the evidence played out for the entire room to see. Fake property deals, forged signatures, offshore accounts, it was all there. Gasps and murmurs filled the air as the guests realized the extent of the Morgans' corruption. But it wasn't over yet. "And if that wasn't enough," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest, "this family also tried to kill me." I played the footage from the night of my poisoning. Catherine's voice echoed through the hall as she gave instructions to the staff, and Fiona's smirk was unmistakable as she handed over the tampered bottle of wine. The crowd's shock turned to outrage. Catherine stormed forward, her composure shattered. "You have no proof. This is all fabricated," she screamed, but her voice lacked conviction. "I think the authorities will decide that," I said, stepping aside as police officers entered the room. Mark had coordinated with them to be on standby, and they wasted no time taking Catherine and Fiona into custody. Victor tried to intervene, but an officer stopped him. "Elena," he said, his voice pleading for the first time, "you don't have to do this." I met his gaze, feeling a strange mix of pity and contempt. You made your choice, Victor. Now I'm making mine. As they led the Morgans away, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in months, I was free. But the night wasn't over. I turned back to the stunned guests. This isn't just my story. It's a reminder that power and greed can destroy lives. But standing up for the truth, that's what rebuilds them. The applause that followed was a blur. All I could feel was the weight lifting off my shoulders. The Morgans had taken so much from me, but they hadn't won. The morning after the gala, I woke up to a flood of messages and calls. News outlets were ablaze with headlines about the Morgans' downfall. The footage from the gala had gone viral, and people were already labeling it one of the biggest scandals in California's business history. Catherine and Fiona were in custody, charged with fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Victor, too, was under investigation, though his involvement seemed more passive. It didn't matter. To me, they were all guilty. The legal battle that followed was grueling. I testified against them, recounting every betrayal, every calculated move they had made to destroy me. It wasn't easy reliving those moments in court, but it was necessary. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for justice. As the trial unfolded, more victims of the Morgans came forward. Investors who had been cheated, employees who had been threatened, and even former friends they had used and discarded. The weight of evidence was overwhelming. The court found Catherine and Fiona guilty on all charges, sentencing them to lengthy prison terms. Victor's involvement was less direct, but he didn't escape unscathed. He lost his position in the company, his reputation was destroyed, and he was ordered to pay significant restitution to the victims. For me, the court's decision was bittersweet. I had won, yes, but it came at a cost. My trust in people had been shattered, and the scars of their betrayal would take time to heal. Still, I knew I couldn't dwell on the pain. I had a life to rebuild. The court also ruled that the Morgans' remaining assets, including their properties and shares in the company, would be liquidated to compensate for the damages they had caused. A significant portion of these funds was awarded to me as restitution for the losses I had suffered. It was poetic justice. The empire they had tried to take from me was now mine to rebuild. But money wasn't my only focus. I knew I wanted to turn this experience into something meaningful, something that could help others. I used part of the settlement to establish a foundation for women who had faced betrayal and abuse, providing them with legal and financial support to rebuild their lives. I called it the Resilience Project. My hotels, which had been struggling during the ordeal, became my sanctuary. I poured my energy into revitalizing them, creating spaces that celebrated community and strength. Guests often approached me, saying they had read my story and found inspiration in my journey. It was humbling, and it reminded me why I had fought so hard to begin with. One day, as I stood in the lobby of my flagship hotel in Los Angeles, a young woman approached me. She was hesitant at first, but eventually, she said, "Your story gave me the courage to leave a toxic situation." Thank you. Her words stayed with me, a reminder that my pain hadn't been in vain. As for Victor, he tried reaching out to me a few times, sending letters that alternated between apologies and excuses. I never responded. I had nothing more to say to him. He was a part of my past, and I was focused on my future. Catherine and Fiona's downfall was swift and unforgiving. Their names became synonymous with greed and corruption, and the once proud Morgan family faded into obscurity. I didn't revel in their suffering, but I didn't pity them either. They had made their choices, and now they were paying the price. My greatest victory wasn't the money or the public vindication. It was reclaiming my sense of self. For so long, I had allowed their schemes to consume me, but now I was free. I had survived, I had fought back, and I had won. Years later, as I reflect on everything that happened, I realize how much I've grown. The betrayal that nearly broke me became the catalyst for my transformation. I'm stronger now, not because of what they did to me, but because of how I chose to respond. This journey taught me an important lesson. Resilience isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving, even in the face of unimaginable challenges. And as I continue to build my life, I carry that lesson with me. knowing that no matter what comes my way, I have the strength to overcome it. This is my story. It's not just about betrayal or revenge. It's about empowerment, redemption, and the unbreakable spirit of a woman who refused to be defeated.